As both human and Covenant forces descend on Installation 04, one of the most pivotal battles of the Human-Covenant War would soon begin, the Battle of Installation 04. Fleeing the destruction of Reach during the Covenant attack on the Epsilon Iridani system, forces of both the UNSC fleet, namely the Pillar of Autumn, and forces of the Covenant Assault Force, sent to Reach to wipe out that human colony, are now both inbound for the mysterious coordinates deciphered and deployed by Cortana, an AI construct recovered from Dr. Halsey at the end of the Battle of Reach. Both factions exited slipspace to find a massive, ancient Forerunner construct looming over a gas giant. This construct would become known as Halo. The objectives of UNSC forces during this engagement would be to basically just survive the Covenant forces in the area, and eventually to disable or destroy the ring itself. Meanwhile, the Covenant sought to wipe out the human expeditionary force and claim the ring for the Covenant, securing it and hopefully activating it to begin the Great Journey. When the Pillar of Autumn exited slipspace in the early hours of September 19th, 2552, they found a Covenant fleet waiting for them. A dozen Covenant Ket-pattern battlecruisers had been arrayed into battle groups of 4, ready to engage the Pillar of Autumn. Under the orders of the Prophet of Stewardship, the Covenant force was not to destroy the Pillar of Autumn, but instead seize her. As a result, a number of Seraphs and boarding craft were launched towards the UNSC vessel, which immediately went on to combat alert. It's around this time that the first Covenant Seraphs arrived at the Pillar of Autumn. Luckily, seeing this threat inbound, the human forces on board the Pillar of Autumn had deployed a number of longsword fighters to attempt to protect their vessel from the incoming Covenant attack, and they were able to successfully repel the first wave of Seraphs, but were overwhelmed by the second, and soon the Pillar of Autumn was boarded. This began an intense hallway-to-hallway battle within the confines of the UNSC cruiser. However, it was always a losing battle for the UNSC forces involved in this engagement, and Captain Keyes put his ship, the Pillar of Autumn, on course to crash onto the ring, and then ordered a full evacuation, with all personnel being expected to leave the vessel. The garrison of Marines on board, as well as the countless sailors serving on the UNSC Pillar of Autumn, made their way to lifeboats, or in the case of several ODSTs, Soyuz pods, and made their way down to the ring, landing in scattered groups across the ring's surface. Meanwhile, the Pillar of Autumn crashed on a large open plateau on the far side of the ring. On the surface of the ring, 2 UNSC military operations began. One saw the Master Chief trying to rally all the survivors in his area to form a cohesive command structure to continue a fight against the Covenant. At the same time, a second similar operation was being carried out by ODSTs that had landed elsewhere on the ring in order to set up a base of operations. This base of operations would become known as Alpha Base. From there, they would coordinate UNSC forces across the surface of the ring, and eventually these two sort of coordinated groups of UNSC troops would congeal into a single operational force. By the night of the 19th, UNSC forces were organized enough to carry out a raid on a Covenant target, the Truth and Reconciliation, a Covenant battlecruiser that had descended to the surface and began deploying Covenant ground forces to the surface of the ring. The objective of this raid was to secure Captain Jacob Keyes, who'd been taken hostage by the Covenant forces, an objective that was ultimately achieved. At the same time, however, Covenant forces had launched a strike force to what was left of the Pillar of Autumn and had managed to successfully secure the wreckage. That wouldn't last long, however, because on the wee hours of September 20th, a strike team led by ODSTs would reclaim control of the Pillar of Autumn very briefly. Meanwhile, elsewhere on the ring, the objective became to secure the ring's control center, and to find that control center, UNSC forces needed to take the Silent Cartographer. As a result, on the morning of September 20th, UNSC forces began their assault on the Silent Cartographer, beginning the Battle of the Silent Cartographer. This installation was located on an island in one of the ring's many oceans. While Covenant forces stationed on that island attempting to break into the Silent Cartographer did put up somewhat of a fight, they were eventually routed by the UNSC assault as human forces managed to take control of a map of the ring. Using that map, they were able to pinpoint the location of the ring's control center. By midday on the 20th, UNSC forces had assaulted and managed to seize control, very briefly, of the ring's control center from Covenant forces. As the assault on the control center was underway, a UNSC expeditionary force stumbled on a flood containment facility located deep in one of the ring's jungles. This would result in the flood being released on the ring. During this flood outbreak, flood spores and flood-infected Covenant forces made their way onto a spirit dropship that was seen fleeing that location as the Master Chief arrived to attempt to link up with other UNSC forces in the area. While the Master Chief descended into the flood containment facility, the infected spirit dropship made its way back to the Truth and Reconciliation, and soon a massive flood outbreak was underway on the Covenant flagship. This sent Covenant forces into chaos, with their chain of command falling apart. But that doesn't mean Covenant forces were unable to coordinate assaults. On the morning of September 21st, Covenant forces managed to seize a UNSC dropship and use it to sneak into Alpha Base, beginning an assault on the UNSC stronghold, ultimately overrunning the impromptu command center set up by UNSC forces. By the end of the day on the 21st, the Master Chief returns to the control room, which is still being held loosely by UNSC forces, only to discover that the ring's true purpose was to wipe out all life in this sector of the galaxy, and opted instead to attempt to destroy the ring as opposed to firing it. Realizing that the best option to destroy the ring would be detonating the reactor on the Pillar of Autumn, they knew they needed Captain Keyes to assist with this operation. However, he had been taken back to the Truth and Reconciliation under unknown circumstances. As such, a second raid was planned against the Covenant flagship. However, when UNSC forces arrived at the Truth and Reconciliation in the morning hours of September 22nd, they found the ship in a very different state from where they had seen it just 48 hours earlier. The ship was now in total disarray, with Covenant forces locked in heavy combat against both UNSC troops carrying out an assault on the battlecruiser and the Flood, which had spread rampant through Covenant ranks. In the chaos, however, Master Chief was able to discern that Captain Keyes had unfortunately perished and become part of the Flood infection. They were still able to recover his neural chip and withdraw from the Truth and Reconciliation. By the evening on the 22nd, a second assault was now underway against the UNSC Pillar of Autumn, this assault consisting primarily of just the Master Chief. The Pillar of Autumn itself had fallen into similar disarray as the Truth and Reconciliation, with the cruiser becoming a battleground for forces of both the Flood and the Covenant. Still, the Master Chief was able to secure the crucial parts of the vessel and set its reactor up to detonate, before fleeing the detonation in a longsword fighter. The Master Chief and Cortana were able to clear the blast zone before the detonation of the ship's reactor ultimately destroyed the ring. The destruction of the ring ultimately wiped out any UNSC, Flood, and Covenant forces still on the surface of the ring, ending the Battle of Installation 04 in what could be described as either a human victory or a draw. Before making their way to take part in this engagement, the Pillar of Autumn had fled the Battle of Reach. If you'd like to learn more about the Battle of Reach, I'll leave a link in the upper right-hand corner to my battle analysis on that engagement. And if you have any other battles you'd like to see covered in future episodes of Battle Analysis and added to the archive, you can let me know down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.